And PE soccer, when I was a kid, you just do like one section of each thing.
Yeah.
And PE soccer was just a whole bunch of kids kicking each other.
Yeah.
Everyone charges the ball. Everyone kicks. Yeah.
It's so cool. Well, that one start.
Yeah.
Hey, folks.
Yes. Hello, folks. We are, we're back in the podcast studio. And you are listening to On This Hill, the podcast from Church on the Hill.
Yeah.
We are Bruce and Jason and Bruce.
Here we are in September. It's good. Yeah.
We've been doing this stuff together, not just podcasting, but pastoring for a while now.
We have.
You have pastored at Church on the Hill longer than I have.
Yeah, we started here when Lynn and I came back off the mission field with our family in 2000. Middle of 2000, came on staff here in 2001. So, yeah, we're in our 24th year.
Yeah, we actually came back from the mission field at the same time. You were on the mission field longer than I was. We were in missions for quite a while, but we were only in China for about 2 years. We were in Arkansas before that. But we actually came back about the same time you came back from Mexico. We came back from China, but we slotted back into Youth with a Mission, which is what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And you came to Church on the Hill.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be here this long. I never thought I'd be pastoring. We always loved ministry, and we felt called to ministry, but we were in a missionary sort of a context, church planting and so forth, and relief work and things like that for 10 or 12 years. And the idea of pastoring was a little bit, I'm not quite sure how I thought about it, but I was kind of like, well, God, surely other people are going to do that.
Yeah.
But and then we got back in 2001 and felt like God challenged us.
I think a lot of missionaries have that feeling. They're like, I'm so glad I don't have to pastor. I'm so glad I'm a missionary. Yeah. I think there's a fair amount of that in the missionaries that I've worked with. Like, that's a tough job.
That's a tough job.
This is great. And, but the reality is missions exist so that the church exists. It exists because the church exists. And they can't be done disconnected from the church.
Yeah.
But then in 2010, so that was, you started pastoring here in 2001, 2, right around there?
2010, I took over the lead position.
Yeah, and then 2010, we planted the Kaiser campus, and that's when I came in.
Yeah.
And I'd never attended Church on the Hill before that. But we'd got to know each other a little bit because you would come and speak in YWAM, and I would hear you.
Yeah.
YWAM here is just down the road from us. And then you invited me, encouraged me to come.
We were building that team.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were great days for a number of reasons. They weren't easy, and it's never easy. But 2008 and 2009 is when we were really looking at a location in the north part of the city, and a series of events and some investigation, a lot of prayer, and we came across the property and said, let's open a Kaiser campus. And
the Sunday that we opened, there was Saturday services before I came around.
Yeah, for a year we did Saturday services.
But I came on the very first Sunday that it was open, which was January 10th, 2010. And now we're not that far away from January 2025.
Yeah.
So that's 15 years. We're nearing 15 years of ministry together. Yeah.
And the reason we opened that North Campus is because it's about, I think it's 13 miles from here, 12 and a half, something like that. And that area of our city is an area that could use more churches, just to put it simply. There's a lot of people that don't go. There's a lot of new people. There's a lot of people that are coming into our area that move there because rents are a little cheaper or housing's a little cheaper. At least it was back in those days. And so, man.
Yeah, and what we're getting to with the conversation we're going to have today is about transition.
Yeah.
Now, Church on the Hill was around a lot longer than we've been around Church on the Hill, both of us.
Yeah.
And so it has gone through transitions.
Like most churches,
of leaders, transitions of buildings, locations.
Yeah.
Several, right?
Yeah. Transition has been part of this history, and I think it's part of life in general, right? Everybody's going to go through transition at some point. But when I came to Church on the Hill first time was in the 80s, and the pastor had been there for decades, and then he retired. Nothing wrong, he just retired, and then they had several pastors over the next 10 or 12 years. Transition's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
I think. And finding your spot is not easy either. I think, like you alluded to earlier, pastoring is not an easy job because there's a certain, I think, personality type and calling that are good at it. You're a shepherd, and sometimes shepherding is a challenge. But and things change all around us. The pandemic turned everything upside down just a few years ago and pastoring through that. No one took a seminary course on how to pastor a church in the pandemic. So it caught us all off guard. But
yeah, but also like the feeling that I have predominantly about what we get to do is I get to do this.
Yeah.
This is what I get to do.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, it is. I love it, and especially with the team that we have. You know, there have been times the team makes a very big difference in ministry, and ministry is done in teams. It should never be done by themselves. Even if you're the only person on staff as a pastor, you still have to have a team, and our team is amazing.
It is, yeah.
But we're here to talk about the coming transition and answer some questions. What is the main first one, maybe?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing, I think, is the great place to start. We've talked about this back, I think, in June, last week of May, June, where right before you took off on sabbatical. And we're going to, in the fall here, I felt like one of my desires or one of my goals has always been that a church, to walk the Church on the Hill, in this case, through a transition that's healthy. And by that, I mean I, as a lead pastor, am going to step out of that position and step into another position where I can continue to serve the church, but not in a lead capacity.
Yeah, make that really clear, too, that step into another position at Church on the Hill.
Yeah.
I've fielded a lot of questions. I mean, not a lot, but there are still some people like, well, where's he going? Oh, he's actually not going anywhere. Bruce is still gonna be here. All of us can be called to different places at different times, but that's not what you're feeling. You're not feeling the call away. But yeah, so we get to see and keep the wisdom on the team, which I appreciate. I know that probably not something you want to dwell on, talking about your wisdom, but for me, as a guy who's taking that lead position, it means the world to me that I have a built-in mentor and someone who has filled these shoes already for years that gets to walk right beside me and speak to me as I lead.
Yeah, that's it's crazy how I'm shocked how many churches have difficult transitions because I've been part of them for one, and then again, my relationship with other pastors in the city and other churches, that sometimes transitions are not smooth, and they're not smooth because I think they're forced, or for some reason they choose to bring in outsiders, people from outside the community, outside the state maybe, and they have to bond to a brand new community, and vice versa. That community has to bond to them. I think what we have is a great advantage because you and I have worked together. We've been here for 15 years, and people know you and they know me, and we've shared leadership responsibilities, and so it's almost like in some ways it is a repositioning on both our parts, right? But the fathers, so to speak, are not going anywhere, and I think that's such a win because it holds the stability of a church, and we're a pretty diverse group. We're a larger church with people from all over, and so some are been with us for years, and others are new, and so I think the church deserves in this city, I think, a healthy transition, and it's entirely possible because I've seen it work, but more often than not, it hasn't.
Is it okay to ask? Because I think a lot of people that just haven't necessarily been in ministry, they don't really know what pastors do outside of Sundays. And there's always the joke, like, you work one day a week, that's awesome. You know, most people don't really believe that. They know you're doing other things, but they don't really know what those things are. So what does a lead pastor do that might be different from an associate pastor, a youth pastor, a men's ministry pastor? Like, what is when we tell people there's going to be that change? What is the change? Because we already teach together in the pulpit. We teach together in the pulpit almost every Sunday. We can't do every service because there's too many services to do that. So we've brought other people onto that team. But what does that mean? Like, can we tell people, like, what does it mean that that position is changing? Practically?
Well, to start with the basics, just real quick, in the book of Ephesians, Paul said God gave gifts to the church. He gave pastors, teachers, evangelists, prophets, and apostles, and for one reason, for the building up and the equipping of the saints. And so I think what pastors do, our job, is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. our job is not to do all the work.
Right.
Although when you're a smaller church, it kind of seems that way.
Yeah, I've been the pastor where I was the only guy on staff, and I mowed the lawn, and
locked the doors,
and I taught Sunday
emptied
school,
the trash,
and youth ministries. I literally did everything.
And that's a tough challenge. I mean, but hopefully it doesn't stay that way because, like you said, you recruit. But I think the difference between maybe a lead pastor and the other pastors on staff is I think the lead pastor should carry and cast vision for the direction of the church. Yeah. Because every church is unique. I've always said churches are like children, right? They're all beautiful, but they're all very different, sometimes radically different. Yes. And their assignments are different, and their contexts. A local church in a city, a local church in a suburb, a local church out in the Eastern Oregon are going to operate very differently. But I think God's got plans and vision for each one because they were born like children with a destiny. So I think for the lead pastor, my job is maybe 2 or 3 things. One is to hear from God, okay, what direction should we be going, following you? And then 2, that building up and training of leaders, the equipping of leaders. And that's something I've always loved to do. It's always been part of my life is this idea of passing on principles and wisdom and helping shape a new generation
That's
coming
what's
behind.
attracted me to Church on the Hill before I'd ever come here is seeing those giftings in you as a pastor here, seeing it happen in Youth of the Mission as you would come and equip us as younger leaders and speak to us. That made me. I remember because what I asked was, "Hey, could I come and intern with you for a while and learn more?" And you said, "No, why don't you just come plant a church with me?" And that's what we did. Yeah. But that was very attractive to me as a.
And we believe, there's a difference there. Like you're maybe mentioning here is that education is a wonderful thing, and that kind of training and discipline, the idea of preparing yourself for ministry, study, and so forth, being able to handle rightly the Word of God. But then there's also the other piece, which is the hands-on training, and I think that's where we focus a lot of, hey, we want to walk with you, kind of the Jesus style, if you will, where he walked, he chose these 12 men who were imperfect and kind of raw at the beginning, and he shaped their lives and taught them to follow. And so, this kind of brings us to the question of why we're doing this. Why we're doing this.
Why? Why would a lead pastor who's still physically fit,
relatively speaking,
very physically fit, very intellectually capable, very spiritually still in the right place. There's no failure. There's no there's no weakness.
There's no weird backstory.
Yeah, there's no weaknesses that's causing this to happen. So why do it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's probably the big one. I think why we're doing it, why I'd like to do it, is because first of all, it's a mandate in Scripture, I think. If you read Psalm 145 or Psalm 78, or even the words of Paul, he said to his son in the faith, Timothy, find faithful men who will be able in turn to teach others. So just in that passage in Timothy.
Which is what Paul had done to Timothy.
Yeah, so you got 4 generations there. You have Paul the father, you have Timothy his son, you have faithful men, the grandsons, and then who will teach others, the great-grandsons. And so there's this concept of one generation shall tell the next the wonderful works of the Lord. And I just think a church that doesn't wrap their mind around that or somehow plan for that, you end up stalling out. That's probably the word I would use, and I could think of examples, but, men who have refused to, this is an interesting thought, that leaders who have been slow to train the next generation or release authority and release responsibility, they end up in a place where now they are forced to do it and the church stumbles. But I think leaders who are aware of up-and-coming young leaders that I'm going to pour into, that I'm going to transfer, that I'm going to trust. I mean, we all know stories of lead pastors who they'll preach 50 weeks out of the year, and the other 2 weeks they bring in an outside speaker. They don't trust anybody on their staff.
And they sit on the stage while they speak.
Kind
of in a big chair. Watching them.
And I just think that's tragic because there's so much raw and up-and-coming talent and giftings. We have such a great team and a deep bench of young men and women who are capable of teaching the Word of God. But if they aren't given a platform, they never develop because, again, it's not just education, it's practice, right? So why we're doing it is I would love to see a next generation because sooner or later, I'm going to be gone anyway. I'm going to be off the stage like
Later,
everybody will
much
be.
later.
Yeah, everybody will be. But I'd love to stay in the organization and in the church and help develop those young leaders.
Yeah.
But pass it to you, who you're going to intern sometime, in the not too distant future.
No, I mean, I'm. It's funny because I'll be 53 at the end of the year, which is when I'll begin as the lead pastor.
Yeah.
There's more to talk about the vote and what that means, and it's not just your decision who leads next,
No.
but it's the congregation's decision. It's all of our decision together. But if that's the way that goes, I'll be 53. You were 53 when you started, which is 15 years ago, as the lead pastor. That's when I came here, and so it's really easy for me to imagine. Oh yeah, 15 years. I know what that feels like. I just did it.
Yeah.
I just did it with Bruce as the one of the second guys, one of the associate guys. So I remember when he started talking to me about this. I remember when I started, was in the pulpit a little bit more. I remember all of these things and thinking, that's the process that needs to begin. Not a year into me thinking, maybe I'll retire now, or maybe I'm ready to do something else. But that actually begins now.
Yeah.
And I'm Gen X too.
And
so
I'm
that's
a baby
53 boomer. Baby boomers. I think we've both seen this in our families as well. There's just this thing that happens that I believe ordained by God the way he made it, is that, you're young parents, you raise these kids, and your parents are still relatively young when you first have your kids.
Yeah.
They're relatively young, they're fit, they're still working. My parents were still working when we had our kids. But then as my kids age, my parents age, and suddenly I'm not just taking care of my kids, I'm maybe starting to take care of my parents.
Yeah.
And roles have changed there where, I used to go to them for advice, then they start asking me questions about what should I do, or what does this mean, or how do you program this phone, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And that kind of change ought to be happening in the church as well. There needs to be a progression, but not a loss.
Right. Or everybody has to start from ground zero or from scratch. And that's, again, I think, and the idea that we're working with here is I'm going to change positions, stay in the church for a season. I don't know how long that will be, but that's up to God. But the idea that, you think about your life is an accumulation of experience and hopefully wisdom on how not to do and how to do things, right? So how wonderful would that be that you could pass that on to the next generation or to a group of leaders you have around you, and they don't have to go through
we talk
tough
about
stuff
learning things the hard way or learn things the easy way.
Yeah.
The easy way is a wise person who's gone down that road before says, "Oh, avoid this pothole, avoid this ditch, do it like this."
Yeah.
I've been down that road. The hard way is you're just kind of stumbling in the dark, and you find out for yourself through mistakes.
Yeah.
And you're still going to make mistakes even with leaders around, but it means a lot to have. I was just thinking about Timothy, like you were mentioning. Timothy had Paul that was older than him. But part of what Paul was telling him to do was to find elders. People. He was the pastor of that church, but he needed guys older than him in his church who could help minister alongside of him. 1st and 2nd Timothy, and it's just
what's interesting about this is the why again is besides the fact of the things we've mentioned of passing on the torch and so forth. But I think another reason I want to do this, and I'm passionate about this idea of transfer or transition, is because it's relatively rare. It's amazing how many people have talked to me since we announced this back in May or June, and from outside the church, and they say, "Hey, I heard that you guys are going to do this transition. You're going to pass it off to Pastor Jason. You're going to take another place," and they say, "That's just amazing." And I thought that shouldn't have to be amazing. But you look at the way politics works, or business works, or the church. And it's a rare thing. Why does it have to be rare? It should be a healthy thing. So the reputation of the body of Christ in the city, I think as we walk through this in the next few months, I think, and I know the word is already out there. Look how they did that. Just yesterday, you and I were in a meeting with a group of pastors here in the city. Of 15 of us in this room. And again, there's a sense of, wow, that's amazing. And it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be that amazing.
Just in politics, it's so adversarial. Like who's going to lead the country, who's going to lead the state or the
whoever's
city.
coming behind me is a threat. You know?
And outgoing presidents or mayors or governors will often try to sabotage the incoming one and make their job even harder so that their party can get reelected the next time. So to have it instead of adversarial, but to have it collaborative. And because it's not about you or I. It's about, well, how do we bring God the most glory?
Yeah.
Like, what brings God the most
Isn't
glory?
it interesting if you look around institutions, whether it's the institution of education or finance or politics or the church, leadership is a difficult role, but it's also a role where men and women are failing on a regular basis. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that there isn't some kind of scandal of the CEO or the pastor, somebody being forced out because of sin or because of bad judgment or whatever. And it just makes people cynical. I think it makes people just sort of cynical to any kind of authority, which is unfortunate because authority is a good thing when it's done correctly. It's a kingdom thing. Authority is a kingdom thing.
Yeah,
We talked about this last week in the message.
and we're not perfect at that, at authority, but we definitely strive to do authority the kingdom of God way.
Yeah, hopefully.
I was just thinking this last week, partly because of the message. I didn't use it as an illustration in the message, but it was something I thought about as an illustration for the message. Was I had an incident just a couple years ago, relatively fresh in ministry, where I had failed someone. I'd let them down. It wasn't a moral failure. It was like an administrative failure.
Yeah.
I should have done something. I didn't get it done. They were members in the church. I told them it would happen, and it didn't happen. And I knew, like, I've got to make this right. I've got to get with them, And so we made an opportunity to sit down and talk. And when we did, I just said, hey, I just want to start at the very beginning, because they were just going to gloss over, just go on and, what's next? What are we going to do? And I said, I need to ask for your forgiveness. I should not have handled that the way I handled it. I could have done better. I didn't do as good as I should have. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? And they started crying. They started crying. And they're like, we've never had leader in ministry apologize to us before. We've never had them ask for our forgiveness before. Like, we've been hurt before, but we've never had one.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to make me look any better.
But it's crazy that it's shocking.
It was my failure. I'd rather not tell that story. But that's what we're hoping for, like that kind of authority, that kind of like, none of us are perfect. We're all in process of grace. But authority is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a God-ordained good thing.
Yeah, because it enables authority, and good authority enables others to thrive. Bad authority doesn't like it when people thrive because the spotlight isn't on me anymore. But you think about the power of godly authority in a family. What does a father do? He allows his authority, when acted out in a godly way, enables the whole family to thrive. A business, any organization, if the authority is healthy and humble, the organization's going to thrive.
So how? What do we talk about? How we're going to do this? Maybe too, just looking at a lot of other churches or denominations and how this works. Just real quickly, I don't want to dwell on that because I want to talk about what we're doing. But I grew up in a denomination where there was a lead pastor of the state. Yeah, and that pastor just made decisions. For every pastor. Yeah. So I grew up in Umatilla, but went to a little church in Hermiston, and we would go to a convention once a year, and in that convention they would announce who the pastors were going to be in each town. And so my pastor sometimes would be finding out, same time that I found out, that he's going to move from a Hermiston church to a Salem church. Yeah. And that was just the way that denomination worked. That they just moved. Others maybe have terms. Some denominations like, well, you're just going to serve here for a term, and then we'll determine after that term, or votes of the congregation. There's a lot of different ways to do this.
What's so bothersome about that idea? Because I've been around that as well, and I have been part of several churches over my career that have done transition kind of like that, and it just is so sad because I think what's happening is the metaphor is being ignored. By that I mean, who is a pastor? What is he supposed to do? Well, I think a pastor is the shepherd, in a sense, the father of a flock. He's not, and Peter would say, don't lord it over them. Don't do it because of filthy lucre. Or he said, but do it, as a representative of Jesus. And so to bring in a total outsider and ask him to lead a group of people, and that people follow. Yeah. It's not impossible. It happens, but you'd imagine the amount of time it takes for a total outsider to come in and get to know, first of all, the congregation, second of all, the city and the context, the church and its direction. And oftentimes they'll change the direction. Like I know denominations that change their pastors every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and everything changes in the church.
Yeah, it's
how they do ministry, who they're ministering to, the structure of the organization, everything changes.
They never get any traction.
Yeah.
So what we've done at Church on the Hill, and it's just us, but I think we've built year after year, we've built layers of leadership and ministries, and they're woven together kind of like a tapestry. And so
within that concept like you're describing, when that change takes place, a lot of times in certain denominations, everyone who's on staff, if there are people on staff, will be told to turn in their resignation.
Yeah.
So when the new pastor comes, you hand him your resignation, and then he can choose to take it or to, no, actually, I'd like you to stay on, or thank you, and I'll be hiring someone new. So not only does the lead pastor change, but your youth ministries might have a brand new guy as well.
All kinds of
so the
turnover.
continuity is just broken.
Yeah.
And you're starting from scratch.
And it's just that system is just rife with weaknesses in the sense of who is there and why are they there? Are they there for a paycheck? Are they there because I'm related to the pastor? Are they there because of do they really want? Are they called there? And I just think what we're trying to do is not, again, it's not unique. I think that there's this ability to just to shift positions within the family and continue to develop what's coming behind and without missing a beat. We don't lose the traction. I think we just keep moving forward.
Yeah, but how we're doing it here and how the denomination of the Assemblies of God does it is by congregational vote.
Right.
So that stays the same. Like a lot of other churches,
The
they
family
have
votes.
a say. Yeah. In the church I grew up, the congregation didn't have a say.
Yeah.
But in many churches, the congregation, the family, has a say.
Yeah.
And in this instance, it's one where the two of us have worked together for a long time. So the first person they're looking at, would be me.
In the assemblies, the denomination we're a part of, we're a nonprofit, a religious nonprofit operating in the state of Oregon. So there's certain protocols we have to follow in order to keep a nonprofit status. And whether like it or not, that's the world we live in this country anyway. And so in the assemblies, the membership is the voting
constituents are the members.
Yeah, the members. And so there's only a few things that they actually do vote on. That is the acquisition of hard property, real estate, or we're selling a building or something like that, or we're going to buy something, and so it's going to indebt the church. But the other thing they vote on is the deacon board, who in turn end up on on our governing board.
Governing board.
So the congregation has a say in that, which they should.
Yeah.
And then the last thing they vote on is a senior pastor. They don't vote on every pastor that gets hired, but they do vote on the senior pastor because in the assemblies, the senior pastor, and in our church, is the CEO, if you will. He's the head of the corporation. So the senior pastor is responsible for everything that goes on, whether it's financial or moral or otherwise.
I remember becoming a member in 2010, and then pretty shortly after that, voting for you as the new lead pastor.
Yeah. A chicken in every pot.
Was that your promise?
That was my promise.
A chicken in every pot.
But so when the vote happens, it's done, in this case, when we're doing this, October 13th, that second Sunday in October, and on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock, and we're going to have a business meeting. We have a business meeting every year. That's, again, part of our bylaws. And in that business meeting, we have to give a financial report, we give a ministry report, and we vote on anything that needs to be voted on. So in that meeting, we'll do all the above. We'll give that financial report, the state of the finances, and there'll be handouts there for people that can, if they want to see where income and liabilities and properties and everything like that, and they can ask questions that night.
Right.
And then there'll be a vote to officially ratify what we've been working on behind the scenes, which is you taking over.
And different churches, even within the Assembly of God, are structured different, but we are very much a pastor-led church.
Yeah.
By design. I believe that elders and pastors are who was anointed to lead churches and congregations, and so even within that board of deacons, that is the legal board, you are the head of that board, and then that changes when we make that vote.
Yeah, and those are the structures we abide by. I mean, both legally and scripturally too. I think Paul ordained pastors in the book of Acts wherever he was planting churches. That's like you just said. One of the things he did everywhere he went was,
Yeah.
hey, I want you to install and ordain pastors and elders. And sometimes that word elder and pastor are interchangeable,
Yeah.
but I see that word as the fathers of a church. It's not a question of value.
No.
Everybody has equal value. Everybody's created in the image of God, but
Yeah.
it's a question of function.
Yeah.
Someone has to lead.
Yeah, and even just like functionally, practically, the way it typically works in most churches, or a pastor is usually a full-time position, not always, but usually a full-time position, where elders they hold jobs, they hold responsibilities, but they also do the pastoral care in the church.
Yeah. Lots of people, just one last thing maybe, but a lot of people have asked me, said to me, I heard you're retiring. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Which is, it's such a...
I even saw that again in an email today.
Yeah.
What about Bruce's retirement? He's not retiring.
Well, that's such an interesting word, right? Isn't it, in our culture? Because sometimes what does that mean exactly? The word retirement has certain images attached to it.
Right. Palm fronds. And Tommy Bahama's shirts.
You get a gold watch going out the door. Thanks for being here. And
relaxing.
You spend the rest of your days
leisure,
puttering around the yard or
golf course.
There's no way I'm going to do that. No. I enjoy a warm beach as much as anybody.
Yeah, they're great.
But after a few weeks, now this is just me. I'm not judging anybody if that's what you're going to do. But I just feel like the call of God on our lives is forever. But it doesn't mean I'm going to continue to do the same thing. But I think the call of God, we're at a place, Lynn and I, and you can attest to this as well. Like, we're not kids, we're not novices. We have we don't know everything, but we know a few things. We have some measure of experience that I want to invest that. I want to invest that back into the kingdom. Yeah. So again, the function's going to change. You're going to have to pick up a lot of the day-to-day things, and again, the vision casting. Yep. And I'd love to work in leadership development and missions and so forth. But in no way do I want to just walk away and go, okay, now what would I do? And the stats are out there of people that oftentimes do just sit on the beach, die sooner than later.
It's a shame, the culture, at least in America, I think, that's been created around that. Not that people don't deserve to work a little less hard at times of their life. That's not my argument. The shame is that so much wisdom just gets cut off and lost, both not just in ministry, but in businesses. Yeah, someone who's been around the block so many times. There was a movie, I think both you and I kind of appreciated it. Was it called The Intern, Robert De Niro?
Yeah, that's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, it's a really very cross-generational.
Yeah. It's not a perfect movie, but just the idea that this older guy gets brought in, but treated like he doesn't know anything.
Yeah, because he's not tech savvy.
He doesn't know how to run this or that. But he actually has a whole lot of wisdom, and they slowly start to realize that, like, oh, you've got a lot more value than we think you have. And I wish we'd pay more attention to that in ministry, that the elders of the faith, hey, sure, the culture has moved on since, someone who's in their 80s was in their 40s. The culture's moved on. But also, they've learned something from that. They've seen, and also we needed to tap back into why do they think differently? Why don't they agree with me on this? As opposed to, this guy just doesn't agree with me about anything. Well, there's a reason for that. He's been around a little bit longer.
We talked about this, you and I think, a few months ago in one of the messages where anything that's old is suspect.
Right.
Anything that's new is automatically thought to be great or thought to be wonderful. But time is the test of that, right? A lot of stuff that was new and exciting has actually fallen by the wayside and proved itself not to be all that great after all. And that's what I love about the kingdom of God, because the word of God and its principles are timeless. Pop culture, I'll be the first to admit, I'm really bad and slow at pop culture, but that doesn't bother me a bit. Yeah. You and I are not going to stand before God one day and give an account for our lack of
Star Wars knowledge.
Yeah, Star Wars, or who played what, and again, God bless them, but I think the word of God and its principles are just timeless. Yeah. The principles of forgiveness, the principles of grace and mercy and wisdom are timeless. It's just an amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah, one of the practical things, too, that's worth mentioning is I think as people ask, well, the role and what does that look like in the change, we don't have any current plan that you won't be, like you will be in the pulpit. You'll continue to be in the pulpit. again, that all of that can change for all of us. We're not saying that will never change, because of course it's going to change one day. But there's no moving you out of the front or taking that opportunity to preach. That's going to continue to happen, because people have asked that question.
The official vote we mentioned is October 13th, and then you and I are going to do a series through the fall up to Christmas. The series is called Life That Works. It's based on a book that I wrote. I'm not here to sell books, but it is something that we actually did this particular series probably, I want to say 2010 or 11. So it's been more than 12, 13 years ago. But it was one of the most enjoyable series that I think that I ever wrote. And so I saved everything and put it into a book form. And you'll see that in the fall.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. Very excited about the series, and you'll hear us talk more about that as well, and life groups, and how that book can be a part of the life groups. So if you're in a life group or would like to be in a life group, then you need to think about, okay, the fall is coming, and they're going to be kicking off some life groups with this sermon series.
Yeah. We're in a great season. I think the world is going to be the world, and it's always going to be that way. But I think it's a wonderful time to be preaching the gospel and be in the church to a hurting world.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for a lot of things, but when I think about the position and the change that you and I are both doing, one of the things that makes me the most thankful is when I look around me at the depth of the bench of the other pastors on the team and the elders that we have around, especially the young pastors.
Yeah.
The young ones are just amazing. Very thankful to say, this is the team I get to pick from as we move forward and put in front and shepherd and prepare to lead when it's my turn to change positions on the bus. Yeah. Because it will be for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I look forward. I don't dread the future. I know there's a lot of anxiety out there, and for a lot of reasons, but I think as a believer, we should be excited. Because He's not overwhelmed. God's not depressed. God's not wringing His hands. His plans march forward, and He's in control.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right.
So hang around. You'll hear more about it as we move on.
Yep. Yeah, the fall is here. We're doing all the fall stuff. All the ministries have kicked off.
Everything's taken off,
Yeah, so if you need to know more about Church in the Hill as far as practical, what's happening on from day to day, just go to the website and you'll find there everything on the calendar.
Yeah, if this has helped you or you think it'd benefit somebody, pass it along. That'd be great.
Yep. All right. Hope to see you on Sunday. Bless you guys.
God bless.